So this is a bit of a scary talk for me because I'm going to start with a confession. The last 4 weeks have been among the toughest in my life. I was turned down and rejected several times in ways that I thought were not possible at this stage in my life or in my career. You see, I thought I was successful. Over the last 8 years, I've built up a nonprofit called Sama that's moved 35,000 people out of poverty through digital work. Most of them come from slums and from rural communities, and before Sama, they live on less than $2 a day. After joining our work programs, these people experience incredible life transformations. Their income goes up by 400%. They move out of slums, they get safe housing. They invest in healthcare and education. And to give you a picture of what this looks like, one of them, a young woman named Vanessa Kanyi, who came from a Nairobi settlement and previously lived on less than $1 a day, joined our programs. She actually used to do data transcription for Tim Ferriss, if you guys know Tim. And 5 years later, she showed up at our annual fundraiser. Unbeknownst to us, we saw her name all of a sudden on the list, and she showed up last year and donated $200. And it turned out that Vanessa had gotten a scholarship to study computer science at Santa Monica College. So that's the sort of impact we've had on people. I've raised $25 million for this cause over the years, been named to countless fellowships, and have turned our work into a broader movement that's now called impact sourcing, this idea of using work to lift people out of poverty. Earlier this week, Fast Company named Sama one of the most innovative firms in the world. And I tell you all of this not to impress you. I tell you this to set the stage, because despite all of this external success, I often fall prey to what I call the dark days. The last 4 weeks were among these dark days. It started with a rejection from a few major donors, people who I thought we had in the bag, who decided not to consider an investment in a new social impact bond that we're running for our program. Just before that, I had a moment at a conference that felt totally demoralizing. I was a speaker, and yet several prominent men at this conference ignored me completely, preferring to address my male friends and almost look through me. It made me feel invisible. And then 2 weeks ago, in the Mississippi River Delta, in a small town in Arkansas where we have a domestic program, our regional Sama director, Terrence, who is Black, was taking a documentary film crew through a local library, and as he was leaving, the librarian turned to him and said, "You better bring these books back or we'll put a rope around your neck." I said this earlier today, and I say it again now because I think it's important for us to realize that these things still happen and that these things are still common for people like Terrence, especially in the rural South. That comment has rattled around my brain ever since and contributed to these dark days. I'm not saying all this to you to elicit sympathy. I'm really the last person you should feel sorry for. My parents were educated, I was born in the richest country in the world, and I have a healthy body and mind. Globally speaking, I won the birth lottery. But I'm telling you this to share the struggle, so that each of you, as you face rejection or disappointment, realize that you're not alone. At least once a year, I go through these dark days, the days I wonder what the point is, the days I compare myself to my friends who work in other fields and have normal schedules, families, and healthy routines, and I contemplate giving up entirely. The dark days for me used to be really bad. Soul-crushing, weight-losing, relationship-ending, insomnia bad. And I realize now that all of this suffering was self-inflicted, caused by a fragile ego. Today I want to share with you what I've learned about the relationship between altruism and this ego. So there's something that I don't think gets discussed enough in the field of social justice. Those of us who run nonprofits and want to fix major problems in the world, those who don't mind making less money than our friends in the private sector, those who tire themselves out raising funds, giving speeches, and advocating for the less fortunate, we have egos. We behave selfishly. Many of us are somewhat narcissistic, just like any other kind of entrepreneur. We dream big, we sweat the details. We are perfectionists and type A's. And let's call a spade a spade. Some estimate that at least 10% of all entrepreneurs, including, I suspect, social justice leaders, are on the bipolar spectrum and exhibit what are called hypomanic tendencies. So there, I've said it. And I say this not out of condemnation. I say this out of love and compassion for myself and for my peers. If we want to solve the world's biggest social problems, we need to admit something quite painful, that everyone, even the Gandhis among us, has a self-interested side. And if we can harness that, if we can understand it and harness our egos and their baggage for good, we will play to the most powerful incentive known to our brain chemistry. We will make it pleasurable rather than sacrificial to do social good. Muhammad Yunus, the 2006 Nobel laureate for his work in microfinance, often describes these two sides of human nature, the selfish bits and the selfless bits, and reminds us that for too long, we have formed our economic system around only the selfish bit, and our moral and faith traditions around the parts of us that are giving and altruistic. This dichotomy is tragic. It's why we have so little capital in the nonprofit sector and an overabundance of capital in the for-profit sector. It's why we end up spending billions of dollars on a drug to make our eyelashes longer, but we don't have enough money to prevent 300,000 women in developing countries from dying in childbirth each year. We can end this dichotomy, but we can only end it if each one of us reaches deep inside and finds our inner altruist, the part of us that wants to change the world, and harnesses that alongside our selfish impulses. I think there are three major barriers that stand in the way of truly harnessing altruism in our economic system. The first is putting social entrepreneurs on what I call the saint pedestal. We're all familiar with this. We expect social justice leaders to be capital H heroes. We don't allow that these people are imperfect beings just like everyone else. This is a problem because it breeds cynicism when we inevitably find out about human flaws in the person that we might be worshiping. When the public finds out that the hero they had been looking up to was a jerk to his wife, or maybe embellished stories to make them more powerful in the media, we go on a witch hunt. We throw up our hands and we say, see, I shouldn't donate money to charity or volunteer or try to get out the vote. They're all crooks. You want a real crook? Go after the people who walked home with giant severance packages after intentionally causing the financial crisis. Not the social entrepreneur who took some shortcuts or demonstrated normal human flaws in a life of service. Take two of the icons in my field, and I should warn you, I might make some enemies by what I'm about to say. Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi. MLK, for all of his incredible work to free a nation from the grip of segregation and racism, was known as a bit of a playboy. He was unfaithful to his wife. He loved dressing nicely, and he cared a lot about his appearance. Dr. King made an impression in fine suits and his elegant hairstyles, something that his critics pointed out. Does this diminish the impact that Martin Luther King Jr. had on America? Does it make him any less compassionate or genius? Of course not. Dr. King's civil disobedience inspires millions of people every day. His words live on in our memorials, like the one across the street, and on our street signs. His lesson is taught in elementary schools across the land. Dr. King was a hero, but he was also a flawed, imperfect human being, just like the rest of us. And if we only see the good in his work, we deny the full spectrum of his humanity. Yes, it makes the story more complicated. MLK wasn't supernatural. He was one of us. So was Gandhi, who is the sole reason I'm delivering this speech from a beautiful stage in San Francisco and not from a small fishing village in India where my great-grandfather comes from. He liberated a nation from colonial rule, and he inspired a generation of social justice advocates, including MLK, with his nonviolent approach to civil rights. And yet, Gandhi was thought to be unkind to his wife, who lived mostly in his shadow. He was short with her, even, some say, cruel. We mythify men like Gandhi and MLK because humans have a penchant for storytelling, and it makes a better story to leave out the bits of someone's character that make her seem less than perfect. We think of these great social justice leaders as perfectly compassionate, wise gods, incapable of human error. So why is this a problem? Why am I standing here and slandering our heroes? What good could this do? Well, here's my beef with the saint pedestal. It absolves the rest of us ordinary human beings from taking action. We think, well, of course MLK fought against injustice. He's just a better human being than I am. He inhabits a different moral universe. He's a hero, and I'm just a normal person trying to get by, make a living, and feed my family. I couldn't do what he did, and I don't have to because I'm cut from a different cloth. I hear this a lot in my own work. I'll speak at a tech conference and someone, often a male venture capitalist or a successful entrepreneur, will come up to me afterwards and say, "I'm so glad you do what you do. You are a better person than me. I just make money. Thank you for your work. We need more people like you." And I watch as that man walks away, and I think, well, why not you? Why are you leaving me here to do all this on my own? We don't need more people like me. We just need ordinary people to get up and do something, to take action, to see in themselves a bit of the nobility that we see in Dr. King or Gandhi. It's there. We just need to allow ourselves to see it, to nourish it, and to let it drive more of our actions. There are no superheroes or gods among us, only human beings in whom great reserves of both compassion and apathy reside. The second barrier to us all being a bit more altruistic is the humility trap. We expect social justice leaders to be endlessly humble, but do you think Elon Musk is humble? What about Richard Branson, Shonda Rhimes? Why is humility seen as so virtuous? What matters is results. Let me tell you something awkward. When I post a picture of myself, especially if I'm made up and nicely dressed after a talk or a media appearance, it gets more attention than, for example, a thoughtful post on how our work could benefit more refugees, or what we're doing to counter Ebola, or a pioneering example of M&A in the nonprofit sector. People like to see pictures of women. And this pattern isn't just true for posts I publish. When our communications director pitches a story on Sama, it often turns into a story about me and my life, complete with a glossy photo spread. This has backfired several times, making our staff wonder, why is our CEO claiming all this credit? And I've often wondered, why is it that posts with a personal story get more juice? Why do journalists prefer to write about me than to write about our business? And what does this do to my ego? Sometimes bad things. I fall prey to what so many leaders experience, the idea that the work that I do defines me, that it's my identity. But it's also the reality that people like personal interest stories more than they like data. We know this. The stories we share are mostly about us because it's what we know best. I think of my friend Britt Morin, who's made her likeness into the core of her brand, Brit & Co. And she says that millennials want to identify with a person, not a brand. Think about Oprah or Martha Stewart. These women tell their stories proudly, and they use their personal brands to build empires. So why do we pick apart the social entrepreneurs who do the same thing, who seem too flashy? Someone once told me, speaking about a peer organization, that the nonprofit was all about marketing. They pointed to the cost of the charity's gala, and they said, "These charities are all about personal brand for the founder. I wish they were more humble." I say, make your judgments based on results. Look at the annual expenditures of the charities that you support and compare that to the impact and strive to maximize the cost per person impacted. Or minimize, the cost per person impacted. Look at that cost per impact to determine whether the nonprofit is effective. It may turn out that the gala that cost $250,000 to put on touched the heart of a few dozen local millionaires who would never have traveled to Africa or to rural America, who put in $1 million into something that they wouldn't have invested prior. It may turn out that the founder's personal brand is the most cost-efficient driver of donors to the charity. It may turn out that spending more on marketing raises awareness of a cause and has ripple effects that nobody predicted. I think a founder with a healthy ego is as useful in the world of social justice as she is in the world of profit-maximizing entrepreneurship. Ego comes with benefits, a willingness to attempt the impossible, to ignore critics, to attract outsized attention, and to maintain a large dose of faith in oneself when no one else has it. These gifts are what make all entrepreneurs successful. So I say, let's not require social entrepreneurs to be super humble. Let them loom large and stand tall. Let them make noise. It will be a refreshing break from news headlines dominated by profit-driven, mostly white male business leaders. This brings me to the third and final barrier to discovering and nurturing our inner altruist, the unchecked ego. Now, you might be wondering how this lady who just served up a big rant on the humility trap is going to tell you about the unchecked ego. But there's a difference. It's very subtle. Speaking up about your work and using your personal brand to sell it is important. But so is remembering that work cannot subsume us. That no matter how many people you lift out of poverty or feed or clothe, your work is just one of many facets of your personality. And your personality is itself an artificial creation. It's irrelevant. Our wants, dreams, and desires don't matter in the infinity of the universe. The self is a construction. I learned this the hard way. I always put work above my relationships, my friendships, and even myself. I defined myself by what I did. And in the field of social justice, that's not only allowed, it's encouraged. Because the work you do is good, it's for others. You're not slaving away for the cause of making more money. So investing your entire being in the work is validated by everyone around you. They call you a saint, a martyr. It feeds the ego, and so paradoxically, in the course of burying myself in the work of helping others, my ego formed a wall around me. My ego cut me off from real intimacy. It made me choose my business over my people. I became prickly and demanding with friends, with family, and with colleagues, driven subconsciously by a desire to win at all costs. The unchecked ego can be deathly, because the only saving grace in this world is the connection between living beings, the intimate connections that we share with people, with animals, with all forms of life. And when you let yourself get walled in, when you let your ego create a false barrier between you and everything else, you lose that grace. The connection phrase. Your mind creates the illusion of aloneness and you suffer. You forget that you are made of stardust, just like everything else. The unchecked ego is my bugbear. It has caused me far greater suffering than any racist comment I hear or experience with sexism. It's undermined my sense of being, that raw joy that children radiate before they learn that they are separate from all other living things. So over the last few years, I've developed a practice that I don't follow nearly enough, but a practice nonetheless. A practice that pulls me through when I feel overwhelmed. I want to share that with you. It consists of 4 things. The first is meditation. I'm not a great meditator, but I find that even 5 minutes of deliberate breathing on my bed in the morning helps a ton. My favorite technique is Tonglen, a simple meditation wherein you visualize breathing in someone else's suffering and breathing out love and compassion for that person. Tonglen has dissolved my rage at certain people, and it's made me a lot more forgiving and calm. Now, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but there's so much more proof to this practice than there ever was. Every month, a new study emerges that finds significant differences in the brains and the bodies of people who meditate. The second technique is positive affirmations. I used to roll my eyes at the thought of reciting positive affirmations, but they work. There's so much evidence that our thought patterns impact our body and our brain, and that these thought patterns are changeable. One way to change negative thought patterns is to replace them with positive beliefs about yourself. And beliefs start with the words that we tell ourselves. Whether you call them prayers, mantras, or affirmations, words become beliefs, and belief becomes action. The third technique is reading about nature, space, and bigger-than-humanity subjects. My brother is an astrophysicist. When we were kids, he used to show me pictures or images of Saturn in his telescope, and I would instantly feel any negative thoughts or concerns fade away. Reminding ourselves of our smallness keeps things in perspective. We just discovered gravitational waves emitting from the collision of 2 black holes. In light of this, do my fundraising abilities really matter that much? No. The fourth is exercise. I kite surf, I box, I do yoga, and I even started tap dancing rather horribly again. And I wouldn't be exaggerating if I said that these activities have saved my life. Music and endorphins, especially when experienced with other people, are an instant happiness cocktail. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that any of this is easy or that I'm good at it. I started a new company last year called Lakshmi that pays living wages to low-income women to produce beautiful organic skincare from East Africa. Running a second business, this one venture-backed, has compounded my egocentrism, making it even harder to dissolve the wall around my work. And yet I find that when I commit to it, the practice holds me. It reminds me that all life's beauty and wonder is contoured by suffering. That suffering is the relief on the canvas that allows us to perceive beauty. And if we can sit with it, if we can observe it without reacting, we can achieve bliss. My bliss, the future that I dream of, is a kind of integrated altruism, a place where our inner grace and benevolence meets our selfish ego, both inside ourselves and in our economic and our political systems. I have molded my life around the idea that work is the best way to move people out of poverty and that work is at the core of human dignity. But it's not all there is. Thank you so much.